This is the second half of content, population, content 2. So, essential questions about population. We're going to look at what is the most populated area in the world, what effect that has on society, what are some ways that countries deal with overpopulation, what are the traditional beliefs about gender preferences, and what is the consequence of gender preference, and how it connects to origami. So world population growth is a concern. And if you look at this graphic, in that white circle, there are more people that live inside that circle than in the entire rest of the world. And this is United States over here, Central America, South America, Africa, Europe, the Middle East, Russia. And then within this circle, you find India and China and Japan and Korea, both North and South, Vietnam, and the Indo-Pacific, and a few other countries. So there are some really strong effects of overpopulation. It limits your resources, including food and water. It puts stress on the natural environment because people are developing and taking up space, and not just for themselves to live in, but also for industry, and also to devote to farming in order so that they have enough food and water, and that reduces the wild parts of the world and the animals and other things that live there. There's a big increase in pollution, and think not just industrial pollution like air pollution and land pollution, but also things like water pollution, just simply from the amount of human waste. There's an increased competition for jobs and housing and mates and material goods and education. There's elevated crime. Crime goes up because everything is so limited that you can't always get what you need to survive. So more people break laws just in order to survive rather than just breaking laws for profit. There's a lower life expectancy. Again, this has to do with less resources, a limited amount of high quality of food, and also a limited amount of medicine and health care. And that links to increased disease. Disease spreads more rapidly in close quarters. That's one of the things that happened when COVID first started, where we didn't know a whole lot about it, is people didn't realize how quickly the disease spread when you were close together. And we learned, thanks to the cruise ships, how that happens, because when you're on one of those big cruise ships, you're with a population of people and you're in a contained space. Ships, even in the large rooms, they're not that big, and you have all these areas where you're eating together and doing recreational things together, swimming together, all of that. And so once it happened on the ship, it spread through the ship's population very quickly, and that's why so many of them were kept out to sea for months before people could get off of them. Over on the right here, you see a capsule hotel in Japan. And what a capsule hotel is it's these little tiny places that each one of those openings, you can see there's a bed, it has pillows and some blankets, there's internet access and screens, and that's about it. Some ledges to put your things. And then once you're in there, you close the door, and you can make it, you can either have it so you can look out and people can't see in, or you can just close it all the way so you can't see out either. And these were designed originally as inexpensive ways for people to travel. But with increasing population and the increasing cost of housing, a lot of young people that are starting out in Japan in the business world, they rent these nightly to sleep in, and this is where they sleep. And then either the workplaces provide a gym that has showers and things so that you can shower, or you go to a private gym or a bathhouse to take a shower and do those kind of personal things. And then you eat elsewhere, or you have instant food in there. And that's how you live. You don't have what a house, like we consider a house, or a room that you go back to the same place every kind of night. That's one of the syndromes of overpopulation. So in China, which has the world's highest population, they had a solution, and they had a one-child law. It was put into effect in 1979. And if you lived in the city during that time, you only were allowed to have one child. And then if you lived in the country, you could have two if your firstborn child was, and quote, female or disabled. Think about that. This law has since changed. You're now allowed to have two children. And what would happen if you went over your limit, over one or over two? You would have to pay an extremely high tax for that second child, and you'd have to pay that every year. We had an exchange student from China. Oh, it was a long time ago now, but she was a second daughter. And the way that her parents avoided paying the tax in China, and a lot of people that are able to do this in China do this, they flew to a different country so that she was born in that country and is therefore technically a citizen of that country as well as China. And that way they kind of went around the law. The one-child law used to be enforced by things that if you had your one child, then if you were poor, they would just go ahead and sterilize you so that you couldn't have any more children. And they would do that to the females, not to the males. And the reasons for the gender preference, because male babies were preferred. And that has to do with tradition. Over on the right, the image, the traditional female gender roles in China was to stay at home and to care for your child. Your parents are obligated to provide a dowry or money when you get married. They have to, if you're getting married, they have to give you money and property. And then if something happens to your husband, you go back home and your parents have to take care of you. And then when you're old, you don't have any property of your own because the man in the family owns everything. So your children have to support you and take care of you. Even now, a lot of the females work, but they still have these kind of responsibilities and traditions. Traditional male roles were to work and bring in the income. If you were a man, you had to support your elders, so you had to support your parents and make sure that they had enough to live on after they retired. And then when you got married, though, your wife came in with her dowry, her money and property, so you became wealthier. They thought that boys were overall luckier than girls, and you also carry on the family name. But there were consequences to the one-child law and the strong preference for boys. So a female child was often aborted. They would find out what sex the child was and then abort it if it was female. They could be victims of infanticide, where if you have, and this is so sad, if you have a girl baby, then she is taken out to the wilderness and left, and she would die. Or abandoned somewhere in a city, an orphanage, a church, so that the child would live but wouldn't belong to the parents, so they could try again to get their son. The majority of children that are up for adoption from China is still female. It's a greatly skewed proportion of females that are adopted into other countries specifically. And then modern fertility methods. It's for the wealthier population now. They tend to do a lot of test tube fertilization, and then you can kind of select the gender of the child. And one of the things to educate that, to kind of prevent bad things from happening to female babies, the Dove Beauty Company had this advertising campaign. You can see some of the images on your right that were about increasing the acceptance and the value of female children, so that if your one child was female, or now your two children, that would be okay. So the connection to origami with this, Noshi origami is the oldest type of origami recorded. And Noshi was folded for gifts. They could be casual gifts to each other, but they could also be gifts to the gods. They were used for sacrifices instead of money or animals or anything like that. And a specific important type of Noshi is Oruzu, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing wrong. And Oruzu is a set of 1,000 cranes. These were folded and offered as a sacrifice in order to gain a wish. And that is a red origami crane. And then over here in this image, there is a temple, and these are stacks of cranes. You sew the cranes together into these long chains of 1,000 cranes. Now, because male children were so important to have a firstborn male child, especially if you were a samurai, a warrior class person, the samurai would fold Uruzu and use it as part of a ritual in order to make sure that their firstborn child was a boy. So they would take the time to fold these, and not just fold these, but fold them perfectly as possible, string them together, and then journey to the temple and present them and ask for a blessing so that they would have a male child. And over on the right, there is a picture of a samurai and his son. This is not so different, the association with cranes, because the crane or the stork is associated with pregnancy and birth around the world. You find it in Africa and Australia and the Americas, and European and American culture associates it with the stork bringing babies. It's one of the things that children used to be told. It was the most common thing they used to be told, was where babies come from, is that a stork delivers them. Sometimes they were told it comes from the Cabbage Patch, and now it's like, oh, we ordered them off of Amazon. But the stork was the thing, and the stork would literally fly down from heaven with a little baby in a bundle and drop it on the porch. And on the right, you have an illustration from an early Bugs Bunny cartoon of, excuse me, the stork flying with baby Bugs Bunny in the little bunny bubble. So your assignment, for this assignment, you need your Chromebook and you need to watch the resource video. So I want you to watch this world population video. The link is in Classroom, and that's the opening screen of it. If you go down to the little gear in YouTube and change it to 2 times the speed, it cuts down the time it takes to 3 minutes from 6 minutes. There isn't any speaking, so that's okay. And what you're going to see is the human population from when human beings, Homo sapiens, were first recorded until now, and how they grew, population grew in different parts of the world. There will be pop-ups of events that impacted population. So things like the Roman Empire and when that spread out, and the Han Dynasty and the Aztec Mayan civilization. Things like the Silk Road, which was a very important trade route that you linked Asia across the Middle East and into Europe. Events such as major wars or plagues or things of that nature. All right. So watch the video, and then in a Google document, write a paragraph that explains your thoughts about world population. You can think about things like, should population be controlled? And if it should, how do we control population? Or what are the effects of world population? Or anything else you would like to talk about. If you want to talk about how many children you would like to have, that's fine. It's up to you. Okay? If you have questions, text me, email me.